Thank you to Impact 24 PR for allowing us to have this spectacular panel. And I just want to give it up to our amazing panelists. We have so much talent here today. It's insane. I don't even know how we can all fit you with the amount of talent that each of you are bringing to the table today. But this is going to be an incredible panel, and we're going to dive deep into how talented each of them are. We're going to start with Matt. I got some chills with that little clip we just saw for Gen V, which is a spinoff of The Boys. When the blood started going in the air, the composition of that music was insane. How did you even start with cueing and pulling together the theme of that main character, Marie? I know she has such a dynamical theme to her, and she's very intricate.
Well, thank you, Marissa. She is very intricate. That's Marie. She's a central character to Gen V, as she mentioned, a show that I co-score. I co-score with somebody named Chris Leonard, so if you hear me say we, that's what I'm referring to. And she is very dynamic because she's very driven, but she also has this insane amount of trauma in her life, if you know the show. And so when it came time to write a theme for her, Chris and I were talking, and we kind of did it backwards, where a lot of times, I say that because a lot of times you'll start with the music and then maybe look at arranging it. And before we even wrote a note, we thought, we really want her theme to be carried by a female vocal. And making that decision, that immediately opened up the doors to how we were going to write her theme. That immediately meant it was going to be a longer statement. The theme itself was not going to be a quick mnemonic. It was going to be a longer statement. And we knew that we had that particular scene to work with because that was 4 minutes-ish into the pilot. So we knew that we had that, and we had a lot of space to work with. A lot of times if you're writing a theme, you might have a little sliver of space. So we knew we had a lot of space, and so we could write this vocal theme. And so we brought on an indie artist that goes by the moniker Katomi to do all the vocal work for the season and presented it to the showrunner. Of course, most important part about writing a theme is getting the showrunner's approval. And Michelle Vasikas as the showrunner, and she was into it. She was into the theme. She was into it being vocal driven. And then, and that particular scene was really fun to write for because, Marie's training. She's taking the initiative. She's doing it on her own. She's doing it behind closed doors. And so it kind of felt like, what's the Rocky Balboa version of Marie's theme? And that was the first iteration of it, and so that's the first time you meet her theme, and we use it throughout the season, all the way up through the finale, where, without spoiling, you see basically that iteration of her theme, but with a full orchestra backing, where the low brass is backing the synth bass and the 808s, and the strings are backing the high vocals and stuff.
Thank you. I really actually feel like I want to be Marie now, but I need your music.
Well, thank you very much.
All right, next up, Shelly, congratulations, by the way, for your Emmy nomination for Only Murders in the Building. So which of the Pickwick triplets did it? I hear everyone laughing. You got so much love from the fans on that specific scene, and I still am obsessed with how in love I am with the series in general. I'm actually addicted. I could watch it 1,000,000 times over and over again. But I would love to know, what is your editing process for that specific scene?
Yeah, well, we got the script, and they were written into the script, and the first thing we did was say, oh, no. Split screens, horror. The directors of the episode, Bob Pulcini and Sherry Springer Berman, I actually had worked with them years ago as their assistant editor back in the day. So we reconnected. I'm now the editor. So we had a shorthand with each other. We could talk, and Bob said, hey, you know what? I think it would be great for us to map this out with title cards before we even shoot it. Steve had been rehearsing it for weeks and weeks, and then he goes in to a studio and pre-records the song. So we had the song, we put it into we edit on an Avid system, we put it into the Avid system, and we start to map it out with title cards and play around with the Avid effects to where we're gonna hit certain things. Bob had an idea. As we started that, we're like, we can't keep track of these title cards. What's going on? They were very short descriptions of each scene, but it was still a mess. So our assistants, Deanna Hyatt and Jamie Clark, said, why don't we color code them so you can at least track who's going where and who's flying around. So we did that. It was, oh gosh, maybe 12 versions of that before we got to where we're like, okay, let's show this to production. So they were quite impressed. So they were able to shoot the different pieces to kind of match where we were going to move them and how we were going to present this. So it was very helpful. But then it still continued on. On the day Steve records it live, he's got it in his ear, the pre-record, but he's performing it live. So we were trying to honor his performance, which was stunning. So we edited mostly live, but we would cut in little bits of the pre-record and kind of mix and match it all and got it to where we thought it was great. Peyton Koch, the co-editor, and I were like, oh, we did a good job. And then we turned it over to the music department and they were like, no. They were okay with how we moved all the squares and split screens, but they kind of went to 100 times more, kind of going in and out each syllable. It was like a pre-record for this syllable, a live for this word, a pre-record for that syllable. It was 1,000 edits to get that performance. So when we got to the mixing stage and saw it in all its glory and color timed and then heard the mix, Peyton and I both were like, oh my God, this is good.
1,000 edits, Shelly. Wow. That is incredible. I almost feel like it could be its own music video.
It is.
Separate, yes. Yeah,
so
that's what I was going to say.
We do have them on YouTube. We also got to cut that as a music video without the split screens. There's some cutaways to the other characters, but if you go to YouTube and Google it, you'll see all the songs of the season on as music videos.
It's so good. If you haven't, YouTube it now. I mean, not now, after our panel. It is incredibly well done.
Thank you.
Thank you, Shelly. Next up, Michael, you were also nominated for an Emmy for Shōgun for the VFX. I would love to know your process for executing and developing the visual effects for key scenes in Shōgun specifically.
Well, thank you, Marissa. Thank you, everybody. Very nice to see you all here today. Shōgun, we started off with a mandate early on that the visual effects were never going to be the star of the show. They were always going to be at the center of the show, and they're an integral piece to the storytelling process. But they were always going to be woven into the fabric of the story, and in order to assist in the telling of the story. So it was our goal to always be as seamless and as invisible as possible. That was the idea behind the visual effects of Shōgun. So we had a lot. We shot the show in British Columbia, Canada, the whole thing. So obviously the world building was going to be a big part of the show. There were lots and lots of scenes that took place in cities that don't exist anymore, in castles that don't exist anymore, these historical locations. And that's another mandate that we set forward, is that we wanted to be as historically accurate as possible, as authentic as possible. So before we did anything, we went through 9 months of research and 9 months of prep. Just dealing with historians in Japan. We brought over advisors from Japan. One individual that we had employed from Kyoto University, he's thought to be the world authority on Sengoku era Japan. We employed him. We wrote a 900-page research Bible of all the research we accumulated. So before we did anything, we had all of that. And then each scene, every time we had a big visual effects scene, of which there are many, It was all based. It all needed to be based in reality. So nothing over the top. Everything had to be real in reality, based in history, and based in historical fact, right down to the tiniest detail. Everything, and that carried through the entire show, not just the visual effects. So that was the mandate for pretty much every scene. If you want to break it down a little bit more specific, I get a specific scene like. The first introduction into Osaka Castle, where we rise up above Toranaga, riding into Osaka Castle in episode 1, and we rise up over the building and we see Osaka Castle. So we studied so many maps of Osaka Castle. We finally found a museum in Japan that had a maquette of Osaka Castle that we used, because the Osaka Castle that's there today, it just doesn't even exist anymore. Even the tower, the Tenshu, is a reproduction that was built in the 1930s. We're talking about something that existed 400 years prior to even what they have built there now. So that's all based on the most historically accurate information we could find. And again, that wasn't just the visual effects, that carried through the entire show. So that was the foundation for it all, was to be accurate, historically accurate, and an authentic representation of Sengoku-era Japan.
Thank you. I mean, I was completely captivated by the first couple seconds, actually, when I watched the first episode of Shōgun. It is insanely stunning. I honestly felt like I was there with each and every single character. So thank you for making me an addict and binge watching that.
Thank you.
All right, next up we've got Eric. Eric, let's dive into your show on Netflix, One Piece. I figured we had some manga fans out there. I've always been obsessed with One Piece. As you know, it is a manga. Also, there has been some anime variations done on this. I am so interested because this is the first adaptation as it being a live action. Was there a lot of pressure on the editing side of things when going into this? Because as you know, us hardcore fans, we really want to see if it's going to be as close to the manga as possible. Did that affect any of the work that you did on this project?
Yeah. The first hour every day of looking at a blank screen, what am I going to do? Ultimately we get this footage, and it was just incredible footage, and everything was shot and executed beautifully. And I'm so, the scene I always go back to is the Zoro climbing out of the well, and young Zoro training to be the master swordsman, and he's against the river, and he's learning that Kuina has just passed, and the footage was beautiful. And we had these terrific fight sequences that were well planned out. Everything was really orchestrated in a great way. And we had these, Zoro climbing out of the well. It was directed, it was scripted, directed, shot, and edited in a very linear way. And everyone was very thrilled with the scene. Everyone was thrilled with the performances. And this went on for a number of months. And then when we sent it up to Oda, he says, "Yeah, this is really good, but what if we did this?" And all he pitched was intercut that scene. So we went back to the drawing board and started figuring it out, how to make this work. And what we learned is the director, Emma Sullivan, she shot all this additional footage of adult Zoro when he's climbing out of the wall, close-ups, stuff of his hands, his arms, his legs, and we were able in the edit to discover ways to really hit these character beats even more. So when young Zoro's training and Queen is saying to him, "You're dropping your elbow," we found a shot in the well where he drops his elbow. When he's falling down the well, we were able to intercut that with him being thrust, as a young man, being thrusted into the air. So we were able to discover all these fascinating things in the edit that just made, it was just a lot of fun to put all this together. And it was, every scene was sort of like that. When we screened it for the fans and they were cheering for the stuff, you're like, wow, okay, this was just a lot of fun to do.
Well, we have a lot of fans out here, it seems like, for One Piece. Yes. If you haven't seen it yet, definitely dive into it. It's very binge-worthy, and congrats on how it came out. I mean, the editing, you really just did such a stunning, spectacular job on it. Next up, we've got Stephanie. Stephanie, you were so multifaceted with all of the different projects you've been working on. I would love to know, Stephanie, what it was like doing a sketch comedy show like a Black Lady sketch show versus a true crime drama like Dahmer. Those are so different.
Yeah, I think, so on the surface they look very, very different, which, contextually they are. But from an editorial standpoint, so much of my process is kind of the same. Ultimately my job is to service the story, but it's also to make sure that all of the characters are represented, that we're kind of telling it as authentically as we can. So the first thing I generally do is I will research something to death, right? So Dahmer is obviously a true story. I spent so much time before I started just watching documentaries, interviews, reading books, trying to find even like music tonally that I could maybe start editing as like my temp score when I was working on it. There's scenes like the victim impact statements sequence that has haunted me since I was a kid when this happened. And I've seen that video before, and it was really kind of a matter of watching it again, as hard as it was, just to make sure that I kind of did that scene justice. So the research on a show like Dahmer is very, very specific. On a show like a Black Lady sketch show, every sketch is a totally different genre, right? So one day you might walk in and you're like, I'm gonna cut a horror sketch today, or the next day it might be like a romantic comedy. So the research for that is like, what are the editing conventions for a rom-com, for example? I would say, I'm gonna cut this sketch tomorrow. I need to watch a number of romantic comedies tonight and make sure I understand like what editorially people might do to make a romantic comedy, like what musically happens, where does the music start, where does it stop, what sound effects are people using. So on a Black Lady sketch show, it was really about trying to replicate those different genres, but also trying to figure out how you put that on its head, right? So maybe it starts as a horror sketch, but you're like, surprise, this is actually an ad for a timeshare, or it starts as a romantic comedy, but at the end it's a horror. So it's really about kind of figuring out how you can take those different editing conventions and turn them into something funny and silly.
Well, you're so multifaceted, Stephanie, and so talented, especially with Dahmer. I was thinking to myself, I think I'd be too scared to edit it.
It was a journey.
Yeah, were you in a room by yourself? Next up, we've got Mark. Mark, you are so talented musically. I know that we talked a little bit before this, and you're based near Nashville, Tennessee. Anyone from Nashville out there? Oh, one person in the back. Yes, we got one.
Yeah.
I would love to know, Mark, as far as creating the musical themes for Frog and Toad, which are some of my childhood favorite books of all time, how was your approach in just creating the musical elements in this series?
Yeah. Well, first of all, what up, Nashville? I like seeing
One person representing back there, that's
but
right.
Thank you. And this is my first time at Comic-Con. I am blown away. It's amazing. Truly incredible. So the books are written by a guy named Arnold LaBelle. And I had read an interview where Arnold LaBelle said that because it's like for early readers and for young children to read, he wanted to really distill all the words, like get things down to the easiest way to understand a story possible. So I thought that was like a really cool thing. And he said he was like, there's like, if it got to a word that was maybe a little, that like the word avalanche is in one of the books, there's no smaller word for avalanche. And he thought, oh, this is a great time for children to learn like a new word. And so he kept that word in there. And so, but everything else is like pretty simple. So I thought that was like a really interesting and cool approach to like childhood development and education. So what I would do is whenever I would write a theme or a motif for one of the characters, I would write something and then I would say, well, what's the LaBelle approach? Like, how do I make this simpler? How do I make this as simple and hummable as possible for kids to listen to where they're gonna be able to associate it without getting too overly complex. And if there was a part in there that needed something fun, I would keep that in there. Even if it was a little bit more complex, I would keep the fun, but not try to overcomplicate it. So I went about approaching all of the melodies in like, I'm gonna create folk songs. I'm gonna create little small motifs that say a simple message, but have some fun in there. Add some jazz instruments. Add some things in there that could really make it fun. So I took the Lobel approach.
I love it. I really want to just listen to the theme songs every time I'm having a sad day. It makes me so happy. All right, so this question can go for anyone. I would love to know if you've planted any Easter eggs in any of your projects. So, example, maybe you've used a friend in the composition of some of your music where you've added their voice into the mix, but anything that kind of relates to that.
Almost all of a Black Lady sketch show is like a giant Easter egg.
Yes.
To be honest, because something amazing that our production designers will do, Cindy and Michelle, is like every sketch, they will put a prop from another sketch somewhere in the background. So no matter what we're doing, it's like, oh, like here's a classroom sketch, but there's like a lunchbox that says 227 on it. That's from a sketch from a couple seasons prior. So it's like I want to make sure I'm keeping those moments in there. And by the end, by our final season, we had characters from different sketches meeting each other, just all these worlds kind of colliding. And one of our last sketches, someone opens up a suitcase, and in it, there's a napkin from every single sketch from the series within there.
Yeah.
Wow, that is so cool, Stephanie.
And then sometimes within the edit also, we'll kind of just put things we know will make each other laugh. So we'll kind of layer the audio where you hear kind of the main present audio, but if you go back and really listen, you'll hear like weird little improv moments happening underneath that it's like, oh, this was for this person, or I know this will make Robin laugh, or this will make this person laugh. So
I need a little cheat sheet now. I'm going to go back and rewatch it so I can get all my little nuggets.
yeah.
I know for season 4 of Only Murders, I can't tell you what episode, but when you hear a horse neigh, it's my sister Jill's Clydesdale Porsche that I recorded on my iPhone.
I love that. And I love the name Porsche as a horse. Pretty fast horse.
She's not so fast. She's a big Clydesdale.
That's all right.
Yeah.
I was on this show called Marvel's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. for a number of seasons, and I will say season 4, there's a number, I worked with the director a number of times, and he liked to hide, he was a Disney fanatic, and he liked to hide Mickey Mouse ears.
Oh.
Just about everywhere.
Got to put that on a resume, huh?
I won't tell you where, but I encourage you guys to rewatch the show and find it.
All right. I got to take notes. I'm taking notes right now, actually, on the panels. Any other Easter eggs?
I've got a little one, and I hesitate to share it because it's not nearly as complex as your example. In Gen V, Marie, the character that we talked about and met, she has a benefactor. It's mentioned many times. She has a benefactor. Benefactor, it's a big mystery. Who is it? And it turns out to be a character named Victoria Newman, who is a very big character in the world of The Boys, which was the spinoff of that Gen V was from. And Victoria did have a mnemonic. It was this weird bowed symbol thing. And so we thought it would be fun. We're like, we know we don't want to spoil the surprise, but could we, getting the permission, of course, of the showrunners, could we put her mnemonic in there anytime that we talk about this mystery benefactor? And so we just thought, like, if we have any super fans out there that have a keen ear for the score, they would have known who the benefactor was. But.
I like that Easter egg. So cool. All right. Actually, Matt, while we're on the theme of that, I'd love to know, because you worked on The Boys and then you transitioned over to the spinoff for Gen V. How did you set the tone and narrative for each different series? Thanks, Marissa. Great question. Establishing the sound of those two shows, we have The Boys and Gen V.
I was going to say that's a big challenge. I think sound, anytime you establish the sound for a show, that's the real nut to crack creatively. And so I'll start with The Boys, because that existed first. And for those of you who don't know, The Boys are people without superpowers trying to take down people who do have superpowers because they're terrible people. I'll just kind of broad brushstroke that. So what is the sound of these people that don't have superpowers? Well, we're kind of automatically, we're immediately the anti-Marvel, right? Like so anything that reads as heroic is out. And so, what really embodies this group of people is they're very spunky, they're very punky, they're very anti-establishment, they're very pick themselves up by their bootstraps, they're very resourceful. And so the score for The Boys came from that, where we've got our bass and drums are very punk bandy. We all play them ourselves. We don't bring in session players, and that's because it's supposed to be not played perfectly. And then on top, there's always there's a layer of distortion and grime. And then we like to use traditional instruments untraditionally. So we have this rule that if you're supposed to pluck it, we'll bow it. If you're supposed to bow it, we'll pluck it. So I'm actually a classically trained violinist my whole life. I'm hemming and hawing because I'm sitting next to somebody that has serious chops on the violin. And so it's funny that I've spent my life studying classical music, and now I'm bowing things that aren't meant to be bowed, and in doing so, just getting these strange, and really the word that we go for is off kilter. We just want you to always be we don't want you to be too settled. So that's the sound of The Boys. And when Gen V came up, it was a big challenge because we needed to live in the same world, but we also needed to complement this new corner. So it takes place at a university. So immediately we have some room to go a little bit more contemporary, bring in some more contemporary sounds. Instead of pick bass, we're using synths and 808s. Another, for example, this might be too geeky, but that's what we're here for, right? Like if we're using like a synth that we'd never use on The Boys, but we would take that synth and use the exact same guitar pedals that we would use on The Boys. So it has that similar level of grime. And then of course, as we already talked about, female vocals, which were kind of interspersed throughout the season, which is something that we would never do on The Boys. But when you get down to it, if you watch a Star Wars spinoff, and you're like, great, this composer's doing their own thing, but I want to hear that thing, right? And if you're watching Gen V, we realize like people are going to want to hear that thing, and that thing is this layer of kind of distortion and taking the full orchestra and pitch bending it. And so there were things that we brought over from The Boys to Gen V so that it felt like, okay, yeah, I'm in that messed up world now still. So a lot of our efforts between the two shows were the palette and less about the themes, because there really wasn't actually, the writers did a fantastic job of threading the spin-off needle, because they really are standalone shows. So themes that we wrote for The Boys really didn't apply to our characters and scenarios in Gen V.
I have to know, if you could choose a character from either Gen V or The Boys, who would you be? I know who I would be, but I have to know who you would want to be.
Homelander, just kidding. I mean, if you were to say which superpower would I want, it would be flying. So now that we just found out in the Boys episode that came out a week or two ago, Starlight or Annie, she can now fly, so I'll go with her if that's
All right, not bad. That's your superpower that you're going to end the panel with later on, right? You're
Yes.
going to showcase that superpower for us all.
Exactly.
All right, Eric, can you describe how your role as one of the editors has shaped One Piece? And what are some specific editing choices that you basically had influenced the storytelling or visual style of the show?
When I came onto One Piece, I was originally brought on for episodes 3 and 4, which were the Usopp and the Zoro episodes. And when we came to the end of all the episodes put together, we went and got notes from Oda, we got notes from Netflix, and we started going back and looking at the pilot. And one of the things we realized with the One Piece world is it's a hard world to get into. You know, there's steampunk, there's pirates, there's all kinds of genres mixed into one. And we wanted to make that accessible for the fans, especially for fans that aren't familiar with this world. So I came involved in the pilot, and we tried to do a lot of world building, and I spent a lot of time working with visual effects, designing shots. What's happening in this first 20 minutes of this pilot? You know, Gold Roger is being executed. What did that spark? And it sparked a pirate revolution. And we needed to understand that this was the beginning of that big movement that shapes the whole world of One Piece. So we designed a lot of these epic shots. We had people running in different directions to show that this explosion has happened in the world. And we also wanted to really show these Easter eggs, not the Easter eggs that I had in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., but Easter eggs of the specific pirates that are going to become major players throughout the course of the show. So we had Shanks, we had Mihawk, we had Buggy the Clown, and we didn't really want to live in these shots for too long. We just wanted it to feel like, well, maybe they're there, maybe they're not there. So when you're really deep in cutting material with everyone, you become a little insulated. You're not quite sure, or is this landing? And we think we were pretty confident it was all working, but then we had a screening just before the show premiered on the Santa Monica Pier for the fans. And you don't know how this is going to be received. And when that first 20 minutes hit, the fans were just lighting up. And we're like, wow, okay, we were able to pull this off. So we sort of knew at that point this is going to be well received, because at that point we were still we weren't totally sure. So my contribution to the pilot, it's especially, to help sell this world, would be a good example of how I'd handle that.
I missed this premiere. Wow, that sounds fun. Santa Monica Pier, where were we all at? We'll get the invite next time, right? Shelly, you wear many hats on Only Murders in the building, and I know that you're not just an editor, you're actually a co-producer as well. How do you separate those two different titles in working on a huge project like this?
Oh, well, that's hard. I think it started because I came up in a features background where editors kind of shepherded the whole project from beginning to end. You were there for all parts of the process. When you get into the television model, it's a much faster pace. You're juggling multiple episodes. When you're done editing, the studio's like, you're locked, you're gone, bye-bye. And I'm like, I don't like that. So I've been able to stay on for the duration. It's a lot of extra work, it is a lot of juggling. What I think fundamentally changed was during COVID, the remote work, and now like all these meetings and all these kind of conversations are happening on Zoom, where it's easier to say, hey, I want the editing team included on the Zoom. If they're too busy and they can't attend, that's okay, but I want them to have the opportunity. So we've kind of turned Only Murders into a much more kind of open and collaborative experience for everyone from beginning to end, and that's helped a lot. But yeah.
Well, job well done. I don't know if I could handle one role specifically, but doing two is insanely incredible, Shelly. All right, next up, Michael. There's so much research and history involved in Shōgun. I would love to know how essential that was in the VFX of the series.
Well, yeah, I mean, it was, it kind of carries back from what I kind of pushed the answer into in the first question, but it was very vital through the entire series, and not just the visual effects, just the entire show as a whole. Everything needed to be grounded in history, grounded in reality. And it was a painstaking process. It became a labor of love for everyone involved in the process. And we wanted to get it right because, like, as from the crew standpoint, we developed a really really close relationship with our cast, with our Japanese crew, our Japanese producers. And for them, it was such an emotional process because we were telling this story from feudal Japan, this time in history. It's never been told either in Japan or in Hollywood or by any entertainment form from any country on such a grand scale, and it's never been shown on such a on such an intricate scale. And so it really brought an emotional reaction from our cast, from our Japanese cast especially. So it was really important to us to really do a good job for them. They were so proud of the material and so proud of everything that we were doing. And and again, the visual effects just took such a central role in the telling of that story, and some more in more places than other places. And I'll give you a perfect example of that. Like one of my, and this is also another example of the research that went into it, because it wasn't always just about history. It was about what really looked real. It was like when a head severs from a body, what's the rotation? What's the rotational physics of that head spin? Oh, wow. And how fast is that head going to fall to the ground when the katana slices through it? So we researched that. We did various simulations on it, and there's one scene in episode 1 where Blackthorn is being led through the village on his way to see Yabashige. Omi's lead him through the village. They get confronted by some of the Christian peasants, and Omi's like, "Don't talk to them." And out of the blue, Omi cuts off one of the peasants' head, and it's a shocking moment. And that moment is one that I'm actually most proud of because it's such a real moment. And again, that's like how the head separates, how it spins, how fast it falls. Like numerous animation revisions went into it. But it's also such an imperative part of the story because at that moment, it's like Blackthorn might as well be on Mars. He might as well be he's on a different planet, a world completely alien and foreign to himself. We went down to the premiere in LA, and I was in a room, we were in a theater at the Academy with 2,000 other people watching that for the first time. And when the head got cut off from that peasant in that scene, there was just like every single person in the theater, a collective gasp. My wife has seen that scene 5 times, and every time she's like, and I'm in my seat, I'm like, yes, that was great. And the lady next to me is like, what's wrong with this guy? And anyway, but that was just, it's just a good example of like how, there's a technical, there's a lot of technical aspects that go into it, but there's a lot of storytelling, important storytelling beats that go into it as well. And as small as maybe, on the scale of the show, that's one of the more smaller visual effects, the severing of the head. But
your wife's looking at you over here
yeah. But from a storytelling beat, it was huge. It's a huge storytelling beat, and so I'm actually quite proud of that moment in the show. That's one of many, but yeah, that's a good example.
Severing of the head, that will live with us forever, I think. Thank you for that informative information. Stephanie, I would love to know the process that you had for handling the mix of humor and historical satire in History of the World Part 2.
Yeah, well, for me, in school, I always struggled with history, to be honest, because I felt like it was such a dry subject, and I was always just like, ugh.
Okay, it's one of my majors. I'll get you intrigued by it.
Sorry.
I got you. You can teach me how to edit, though.
But I think for me, it was like the way that it was presented. And so this show was really exciting in that it was a way to almost like re-envision how we're telling history and make people excited about history in a way. So we had all of these amazing comedians, amazing just improv performers who brought so much to the show, but it's really about like, I guess just combining the historical elements with like modern day thoughts and ideas. So for example, you would never think of Sigmund Freud and Taika Waititi together, right? Like those aren't two things that would go together, but he's such an incredible improv comedian that he gave us so much to work with, so much just like modern day jokes. that still applied to Sigmund Freud, and so it was a fun way to kind of combine those elements. Another example is, Jack Black played Stalin in History of the World, and he, you don't think of Stalin and like musical numbers, but his entire story arc was, a musical. So he's singing about love and light and how he just wants, world peace and all of these things that are not the way it actually played out. But so it's, people who watch the show can go and kind of like research afterwards, you know what I mean? And
Stephanie, I think you may be a history professor after all.
Yeah,
I didn't know this was in our future. Who knew?
Yeah, after all of this, we had like, Kublai Khan, the running joke throughout the show is like he has, ancestors throughout the world, just millions of ancestors or billions. And so we have one sketch that's like, Concestry. It's like a 23andMe, 23andMe type thing, but everyone is related to Kublai Khan. And, Real Housewives of Kublai Khan as well. So it was presenting it in sort of like a reality context. So it was really about just combining those.
Love it. Mark, real quick, we'll end with our last question with you. What techniques and musical instruments did you use for Frog and Toad?
So before moving to Nashville, I'm originally from Paducah, Kentucky. Any Kentucky people?
Any Kentucky? Same in the back
I think
row
it's
again.
the same guy. Yeah.
Kentucky sitting next to Nashville, Tennessee.
So I'm originally from Paducah, Kentucky. Paducah is an interesting town in that it's like halfway between Chicago and New Orleans on the Mississippi River, and so you get this like kind of interesting jazz coming down from Chicago, but also this Dixieland coming up from New Orleans, but it's got the bluegrass states, all the bluegrass influences of Kentucky, Appalachian folk, 2 hours from Nashville, so these country things. And it's sort of this really interesting organic sounds that happen in my hometown. And so I thought I'd apply that to Frog and Toad, because Frog and Toad's this like pretty organic, rootsy, woodsy, a lot of outdoor scenes. The beautiful animation is a lot of it's outdoors, and so I thought, oh, this like really applies, and this kind of works. I was doing a family trip down to New Orleans, and I had just gotten hired as the songwriter for Frog and Toad, and I had the executive producer was taking a family vacation in New Orleans the exact same time I was, and he was literally 1 block away. And we caught up, we got together, had some drinks, and we were talking. We're listening to the music of New Orleans, and we're listening to all these like kind of singular instruments playing. And we're talking, we're like, wow, this is so cool. What if we like applied this to Frog and Toad? And then I ended up getting a composer job, so I took that singular instruments, but it's got fiddle. I'm a fiddle player, so it's got fiddle.
We were hoping you brought your fiddle with you, but
well, got to hear me and Matt. I'll do
yes, we are coming to a conclusion. I wish we could continue on. We just had such a fun, vibrant panel today with so many incredible stories. I just want to thank everyone who came out to this panel. I want to thank each of our panelists for just being here and telling our stories. You're so talented. Thank you to Impact 24 as well for allowing us to actually have this panel, as well as Comic-Con. And if any of you want to see the entire panel, please feel free to go to @Impact24 for a full breakdown of this, and also for any other future projects. And I hope that you enjoy the rest of your Comic-Con experience, everyone. Have a good rest of your day.